Let's get started. Loretta, I will let you take over. I'm gonna take myself off the screen here. Okay.
Okay, I really you can't see me, but I'm smiling and I'm loving this gorgeous weather. And I thank everybody for taking a little bit of your time out tonight to join us for this parent presentation. Uh, I work, again, my name is Loretta Cohen. I work for an organization called Westchester Communities That Care, and we partner with the district to do this speaker series for parents, along with a whole host of other things. We start with something called the Pennsylvania Youth Survey, which you might be hearing more about tonight. Um, that data informs our work and what we do. The goal really is to improve outcomes for youth. We do that mainly by looking at the data points that come to us through that survey, looking at other data research from, around the country, the world, the state, and examine and picking priorities from that data. This past school year, we picked a data point that had to do with kids' commitment to school, actually. We've seen those numbers declining over the years, and lots of people have lots of theories on why that might be. Um, the reason we care about it is that when kids don't feel a connection at school where they spend 6, 7 hours a day, um, that's hard on them emotionally. It's important for them to understand the value of the time they spend there. It goes well beyond academics, has a lot to do with social and uh, planning, and you hear a lot about soft skills that employers are looking for nowadays. So we put together, which I wish I was able to share with you right now, but we put together a public health campaign actually about that. It says you are the OG influencer. That's you, the parents. You are the OG influencers. And we want to celebrate that. We want to remind you of that your influence actually doesn't go away even as the kids age. So we're super grateful to have Selena here with us tonight. She is with Care Treatment Centers. You can't see my slide because of our tech issues, but I also want to give a shout out to JL Entertainment Systems, who helped us by sponsoring this program tonight. But Selena works for Care Education Alliance. The Care Treatment Centers has a special prevention piece called their Education Alliance, and she's been with Care for many years. Sorry, I don't recall how many. She can tell you more, but she is a certified addiction specialist, tobacco prevention specialist, many, many years in the field, also adjunct professor at Westchester University. So we are so happy to have her tonight with us to talk about how parents can continue to be that role model, especially as it relates to issues of substance use and vaping, which was one of our big things that we've been trying to tackle. So thanks, Selena. Off to you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for having me. I'm really grateful. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, so I'm happy to be here to connect with you all. So yeah, I work at Karen, and I've actually been there for 11 years now, but it's actually one of the oldest treatment facilities in the country, and it's an inpatient treatment facility. So people come who are struggling with substance use disorder. They actually live with us. We have a place in Pennsylvania. We have locations in Florida as well. But I actually work in their Education Alliance department, which I feel it's what drew me to Karen, because it's the largest department at a treatment facility, and our job is to prevent young people, from actually needing substance use treatment, to prevent them from struggling with addiction. So it was one of the biggest draws for me, is I loved that a treatment facility had such a strong focus on prevention. So that's what I get to do. I get to go around to Philadelphia and all the surrounding suburbs and work with middle school students and high school students. I run nicotine cessation groups, cannabis reduction groups. I do tons of presentations, prevention presentations for middle school and high school. I used to work with adults who were struggling with tobacco and nicotine. And I really felt, I was working with people that were smoking 2, 3 packs of cigarettes a day and spending, most of their income on that. So I really decided that working with youth and preventing that kind of experience is where I wanted to focus my attention. In addition, I do teach at Westchester in their public health department. There, I focus on mental health as well as death and dying. I have a grief counseling certification as well, because a lot of the students I work with, they've experienced loss, and so I wanted to have that as another tool to be able to support them through that process. That's a little bit about me, and I'm really happy to be with you tonight. And I also have two children. They're 25. So they're grown, they're twins. But a lot of this was really still fresh in my mind because we focused on this a lot, we focused on conversations and prevention in our home as they grew. So I'm really happy to share some of the things that I learned throughout that process and as well as in my professional life. So what I hope to share with you today is really just all the understanding of addiction, especially how it pertains to the teen brain. We're going to talk about current trends, and that's where I want to start, just to give us all foundation. I think that it's important to understand what they're dealing with, what they're getting presented with, and being as up to date as possible on what the current trends are around the most commonly used substances. We're going to talk about risk factors and protective factors, and even ideas to prompt discussion around this topic and resources on how to support you. So it's always really helpful to think back to our experience first, right? What our experience was like when we were in high school, because it was vastly different from many of us, right? What life looked like when you were your child's age, right? How we communicated with friends and family was different. I'm a child of I was in high school in the 90s, so it was vastly different. I had to if I wanted to talk on the phone privately in my home, we had a really long cord, and I had to wrap it around the corner and kind of hide in the closet. My friends had to call and ask for me, and had to speak to my parents, right? Some of you may have experienced that. If we wanted to hang out with our friends, I could figure out where everybody was because all the bikes were out front of their house. It was a different time. And that's how we spent our time. I went outside until the streetlights came on and came inside. And it was a very different experience, right? And alcohol and drugs, the delivery systems were different. I mean, it was certainly around, of course, but people smoked cigarettes, they drank alcohol if they did these things, and they smoked marijuana. And even the delivery systems, tech in general, obviously, the way we communicate, the way our children communicate, entirely different. And the way that people use substances is very different as well. And again, that's why I like to start with trends, so that we have a good understanding on how we can influence our kids if we know what they're dealing with, right? So in general, current trends, I'm going to start with alcohol, because alcohol still, despite all the conversations that we have, pardon me, is still the most commonly used substance, right? I'm going to refer to monitoring the future in this data point because it's actually national data, really similar to PAYS data, Pennsylvania Youth Survey, which they ask 8th graders, 10th graders, and 12th graders about substance use. So 12.9% of 8th graders, 26.1% of 10th graders, and a little over 40% of 12th graders had reported alcohol use in the last year. And what we do know about alcohol use among young people, again, it is the most commonly used substance, and it does still affect their brain. It actually lowers inhibitions, of course, and can impair memory. The way that alcohol impacts our brain is actually from front to back. So the frontal lobe is decision making, right? So it affects decision making first. Then it starts to affect memory and emotion, and then ideally at the end, it starts to impact brainstem. And brainstem is really like our basic skills, and breathing and body temperature, stuff that we regulate without thinking about it, right? So alcohol starts to affect decision making, then memory, then coordination and emotion, slurred speech, and if someone drinks too much, we start to see the impact on the brainstem, right? So that's where the breathing and heart rate gets impacted. And the reason I say all that is because when young people do consume alcohol, historically they binge drink, right? They drink a lot in one sitting. So it's not necessarily they're having a glass of wine with dinner. When they do drink, they're twice as likely to drink more often or binge drink. And they're also twice as likely to actually meet the clinical diagnosis for alcohol use disorder because of the way that they drink when they do drink. Again, that binge drinking. We can only process one drink an hour. So anything more than that, we start to get intoxicated. And essentially, that is the goal for younger people who typically do drink. And the impact also is what we see is the growing brain. And I'm going to talk a lot about the growing brain in a moment, but the frontal lobe is not developed until they're 25. And when alcohol is added to the brain, it impacts it. It changes the way it develops. It can actually damage the structure. It can change memory. It can change impulse control. It can affect mental health. We see this across the board with all substance use. The younger that somebody starts to use, the greater the impact on mental health into adulthood, as well as addiction. Working at a treatment facility, one of the first questions we ask people when they come in for inpatient treatment is, what was your age of first use? How old were you when you started to use any substance? And almost always they say under 18. And there's a very good reason for that. The younger that anyone starts to use a substance, the more likely they are to struggle with addiction, and more likely they are also to struggle with mental health issues, like I said, depression and anxiety. Now switching to nicotine, it is still one of the more commonly used substances, not as much as alcohol and cannabis, actually, but it is still something that we're seeing often, normally in the form of vaping and nicotine pouches, what I'll talk about in a moment. So about 8% of high school students and about 3.5% of middle school students say that they vaped in the last 30 days. That's kind of a key data point, because if they vaped in the last 30 days, it typically points to the fact that they vape more often. So we're really kind of looking for students who actually are using on a regular basis. When they do use, they typically use the disposable products, which I'll talk about in a moment, that are pretty high in nicotine. They have high levels of nicotine. And we know that, again, someone who's under the age of 25, someone whose brain is still developing, adding nicotine to that growing process can affect impulse control, can affect memory and learning, as well as emotional regulation. And also it can actually have effects on our body, right? So effects on our throat, our respiratory system, even digestive concerns. So just a brief history, because I love to talk about nicotine because I'm a tobacco treatment specialist. So the history is really appealing to me. I hope you'll find it appealing as well, just for understanding. The first generation of vaping products used to look like cigarettes. I was actually working with adults when these came out. They came out intended initially for adults to help traditional tobacco users, those that were using cigarettes, to try to lure them away and have them use these products. Only about 3% of adult tobacco users actually switched to vapes. So really quickly, we saw the second generation appear. And the second generation was really clearly targeted at young people. There was fruity flavors, colors, and so forth. So they switched the marketing to young people because they realized that that was an audience that was probably more likely to use these products. And they were correct. That's when we really saw sort of the epidemic of vaping appear. The third generation are these mods, which are you have to buy the liquid separately and you have to add it in to the vaping device. And they're larger and a little bit more bulky, and there's a lot more vape clouds that come out. They're not subtle. So although these are still around, they're not often used by youth because they're very obvious that someone is vaping. The fourth generation sort of answered that for young people, unfortunately, because it made it more subtle. It made the devices more subtle, easier to hide. They even looked like other things, like the Juul. It had, at one point, 95% of the vaping market because they were easy to put in your hand, easy to hide, and easy to use. However, there was a law that was passed a few years back that prevented flavors from being added to these products. And the flavors were also a pretty big appeal. So there was a loophole in this where vaping devices that were disposable found that loophole. So that's what we see most young people use now, are these vaping devices that can be thrown away after 5,000 puffs, 10,000 puffs, like after they're 20,000 puffs, depending on the product. But after they're used up, the entire product's thrown away and they buy a new one. These products are still somewhat affordable, although, they do have a fairly, $20-$30 cost, even sometimes more depending on the product. But they have flavors and they have incredibly high levels of nicotine. I mean, really equivalent to like 1 or 2 packs of cigarettes. And some of them I've even seen, some of the more expensive devices have like games that you can play and so forth. So these are all things that are not technically legal, although there is a loophole that's still allowing these to be sold. So in every single vape device, we know that there's an impact. Everybody that uses these, we know that there's an impact on the developing brain. There is a potential for poisoning because of the high levels of nicotine. I will work with students who say, I vaped all weekend and I felt nauseous. And that's the indication that they were experiencing some level of poison, overdose. There's gum health issues, mouth health issues, nausea and dizziness. We find that a lot of students that begin to vape nicotine are more likely to vape cannabis or use other substances. There's respiratory issues, ear, nose, and throat irritation, as well as even some students who do actually start to explore other tobacco products like cigarettes. These other product that I'm seeing a rise in is the nicotine pouches. So these are like Zyn and Rogue. They're very small pouches that almost look like tea bags, and they're full of nicotine salts. They're put in between the mouth and the lip and dissolved through the digestive tract. So they go through into the gums and they go through the digestive tract, and they have flavors as well. And they're often mistaken for a product that helps people quit. And this is not the case. These are not approved by the FDA. These are not like the nicotine patch of the gum. These are considered a nicotine delivery system like the vape. They came on the market around 2014. We still don't really understand the long-term effects, and nicotine salt is still relatively new, but we are seeing a pretty significant rise because these are subtle. They don't set off a vape detector. Often when you're talking to somebody, you don't even necessarily realize that they have them in their mouth. And the amount of nicotine that is delivered is a large amount. The smaller Zyn pouches, the ones that have the least amount, is about 1.5 milligrams, which is about the equivalent of a half a cigarette. 3 milligrams is the equivalent of 1 cigarette's worth of nicotine. The 6 milligram is about the equivalent of 2 cigarettes, and the 9 milligram is the equivalent of 3 cigarettes. And these are pouches being put in people's mouths, and sometimes they do multiple. So it's a lot of nicotine getting into the system at one time, and they're relatively cheap. $4 a can, 5 for 18. And these are still, obviously all of these products, you have to be 21 to purchase. Alcohol, nicotine, nationally, you have to be 21 to purchase. But many students are finding ways to purchase these. They're finding people who are willing to sell as far as stores or even peers who are willing to sell. And we know, again, like alcohol, the risks are addiction as well as impact on the developing brain, attention, learning, and mood and impulse control are impacted. Again, thinking back to that age of first use, when someone's coming into inpatient treatment, that question is key because the younger that someone starts to use, the greater the risk factor for addiction, as well as, again, attention, learning, mood. Mental health issues, we see increase in anxiety, feelings of depression, as well as blood pressure, heart rate increases. It's a stimulant, so it has those effects on the nervous system. When I ask students and when we're working with students and trying to figure out why they use, one of the first things I hear is curiosity. Other people were doing it. I wanted to understand why. Friends use, that sort of thing, getting a buzz. But then when we dig a little bit deeper, a lot of times it's anxiety and stress. A lot of times it's uncomfortable feelings, anger, boredom, looking for those sorts of things and asking for ways to deal with those without actually, needing coping skills. So these are a lot of the reasons when I work with students, one of my major focuses up is trying to actually give them those coping skills and focus on that. So just wanted to share this, and I'll share this PowerPoint at the end. If you do know a store that sells underage nicotine products to underage children, there is actually a place that you can email or text or call, and they will send undercover students to purchase, and then they will find the store if they're sold. So I like to share this because this is something that I think is really important to educate stores that this is not an option for young people. I'm going to switch gears and talk about cannabis briefly. So cannabis, we're seeing an increase in cannabis use, and it's something that is coming close to alcohol use among young people. This was Monitoring the Future, again, that national data. 7.2% of 8th graders, 15.9% of 10th graders, and 25.8% of 12th graders. Once we see the PAYS data come out, I do believe that this will be much higher, because it is something that, at least in our interactions as well, we're seeing a lot more students report using cannabis. It disrupts the areas of the brain responsible for memory and learning, as well as coordination. We work with a lot of student athletes, really educating them on prevention around this and making sure that they know that it does interfere with all of that. Increased risk of anxiety, depression. Teens have a higher chance of developing cannabis use disorder when they start to use at a younger age. And many do experience long-term changes to the brain and function. Excuse me one second. So one thing that's really important to remember around this is there's a couple different ways that cannabis is delivered, and actually there is actually ways that young people can purchase cannabis over the counter without having a card. We're not, Pennsylvania is not a it's not a recreational state. However, the medical marijuana, if you have that card as an adult, you can purchase. But we do find that certain things like Delta 8, for example, derived from hemp, can be purchased, or a form of it can be purchased at a gas station. It won't get people as high as what we think of original marijuana, but it is something that that does alter people. There is a psychoactive component. When we think of marijuana in its traditional form, we think of Delta 9. That is the derived from marijuana and tends to be what has THC, the psychoactive ingredient that gets people high. Delta 10 is also less psychoactive, derived from hemp, but again, it can be something that is purchased. CBD is also something that we think of. Although not regulated by the FDA, it is important to note that it is something that I think that a lot of people will use for different things. We typically tell young people to try to stay away from CBD for a couple different reasons. One, it's not regulated, so we don't necessarily know the effects. But also, if someone's using medication, some other kind of prescription medication, it does actually, it can impact that prescription medication. So talking to a doctor too is really important. So THC is what we think of when we think of marijuana, and that is what lingers in the body and the brain. That is the psychoactive ingredient that gets people high. It's actually a mixed action drug, so it can be a stimulant like nicotine, it can be a depressant like alcohol, or it could be a hallucinogen even, like acid, right? And sometimes people don't know what strain they're getting, so that's also an important thing to remember. And there's, of course, a lot of different methods of consumption. People do still smoke the flower and the plant, and people do eat it. Edibles are fairly popular. But most of the students that I work with do vape it, right? So they vape some kind of concentrate. And what's really important to understand about concentrates is the level of THC. So in the 60s and 70s, prior to vaping, of course, THC was about 0.5 to 1%. In the 80s and 90s, it was 3 to 4% THC was in the marijuana. Now, in the waxes and the dabs and the things that are vaped, we actually typically see about 95 to 99% THC. The 40% number, just as a note, in 2017, we started to see vaping become popular for cannabis users, and it was at about 40%. In the time from 2017 to now, it's increased so much that 95 to 99% THC is the average in all vape devices. And the reason that's a huge concern is one, it's incredibly high. I mean, if you look at the difference, the comparison, 20 years ago, it's like the caffeine levels of a 20-ounce soda to now we're looking at, so many 33 16-ounce cappuccinos. So that's kind of like the caffeine comparison. That's how much it's grown. That's how much it's jumped. So that high potency affects physical and mental health among young people, especially again when they start under the age of 25. We know that they're more likely to struggle with substance use disorder and they're more likely to struggle with addiction to marijuana, up to 50% risk for those who start under the age of 18. So again, it's 4 to 7% or times more likely that they will actually get cannabis use disorder or develop cannabis use disorder. So we know that those risk factors are incredibly high for young people who begin at a younger age. And then when people do try to quit, they experience withdrawal because they're experiencing addiction. So cannabis withdrawal looks like this restlessness, irritability, and anxiety, as well as sleep disturbances. That's one of the most common things reported. Appetite disturbances, depression, and weight loss. And we also know that, dangers of cannabis use disorder. Short term, we find a lot of students who do report initially that it can sometimes seem like it's relaxing or lowers anxiety and depression. But we find that long term, it actually can make that much worse for young people. We also see long term, there's like cough, a chronic cough, like a bronchitis that's reported, impaired academic work, mental health problems, risk of car crashes increases, as well as substance use disorder and addiction to other substances. And again, withdrawal symptoms, craving, memory problems, sleep disturbances, and stress. I did want to mention CHS as well. And this is something that we're seeing more often because of the high levels of THC in these products. There's actually a syndrome that can occur where someone actually continues to feel nauseous or vomit and has abdominal pain to the point where temporary relief is from hot showers, and that we find that most students actually need medical intervention to support with this. Most young people who have this high potency THCs, it's from high potency THC products. When they have CHS, they actually do need to get medical intervention, IV fluids, and anti-nausea meds to treat this. And this is something that we're seeing more often because of the high potencies. And again, we worry about addiction, 1 in 6 teens, psychological and physical dependence, learning, how it impacts learning, it impacts the hippocampus, it impacts memory. So we find that it interferes with problem solving, can lower IQ by up to 6 points. It can affect driving, coordination, concentration, mental health issues, and lung health are all impacted. I want to very briefly talk about fentanyl. This is not something that we see many young people report using. And the only reason we even really bring it up is because of the small group of young people that do report using fentanyl, they are at higher risk because they don't necessarily think they're using fentanyl, actually, is really how I should phrase that. Of the young people who end up using fentanyl, they believe that they're purchasing a different pill. They believe that they're taking a different pill, like Xanax. They think that they're taking a pill that doesn't have fentanyl in it. And if it's purchased illegally, it has a higher risk of having fentanyl. So we try to do a lot of education around not taking other people's medications, making sure that you're, only taking medications that are prescribed to you, because we know that there's an incredible risk of fentanyl being in these products that can be purchased illegally. Okay, so I just wanted to give you like a foundation about the substances that we're seeing. I'm going to switch gears and talk about addiction. adolescence is a vulnerable time for addiction, right? But their job literally is to learn. Their job is to take risks at this age. Their job is to try out for a play or the sport that they're not sure if they're going to make. Their job is to be curious. Their job is literally to explore, take risks, and learn. And that is what actually makes them more vulnerable, because their brain is primed to do all of those things. Addiction is a learning process. What happens is when someone adds a substance, especially to a growing brain, the reward center responds, and it overwhelms the brain with dopamine and serotonin, all these feel good chemicals, right? So the brain just simply learns, hey, I liked the way that made me feel. I'm going to try that again. That's why they're so vulnerable. That's what addiction really is. Addiction is a chronic relapsing disease characterized by drug seeking or other, technology seeking. It doesn't necessarily even have to be drugs, right? It can be other things. But what happens is someone keeps seeking out this substance feeling despite harmful consequences, despite negative consequences, despite getting suspended or caught at home and disappointing family, right? And that's where we see students who continues to do this despite being despite the consequences. That is literally, teens are they live in their reward center, right? That is the most developed part of their brain. The frontal lobe still developing. So the part that's responsible for logic and decision making is not quite done yet. But the part that is responsible for emotion and pleasure and reward, very much developed, right? So that's where they spend a lot of their time. And that's how addiction becomes an issue for young people. For example, like let's say nicotine's absorbed into someone's system, 7 to 10 seconds. It's incredibly fast. All of these delivery systems can get to the brain within 7 to 10 seconds. And then dopamine's released, right? Dopamine's triggered, serotonin's triggered, and it floods the brain. And so potentially the motivation to repeat is there. They remember, it creates a memory. And over a period of time, if someone continues to add nicotine into their system, their body's going to get used to it. The tolerance is going to develop. So they're going to have to increase their dose in order to try to feel the way they did before, because what's happening is they keep adding it, so their dopamine levels go down. And that's when people start to experience withdrawal. If they present it if they use it often enough, they're going to become dependent on it. And without it, they're going to experience stress and hunger and headaches and uncomfortable feelings and inability to pay attention. And that's how addiction, starts with our young people. I feel hungry and I decide to eat my favorite food. And dopamine and serotonin are released. We get all sorts of like natural ways that dopamine and serotonin are released. I have a great time with people I love, or I watch my favorite movie, or we laugh, or I hang out with my pet, right? I exercise. So many different ways that you get a dopamine and serotonin release. And that creates a good memory. And that is my brain's, makes a note. Let's repeat that. That felt great. We all have our dopamine baseline, right? We're all walking around kind of going through our day. We see someone we love, dopamine increases, then we go back. Maybe something not so great happens, we go below our baseline, but then we return. If I'm going through my day and I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling upset and I can't quite figure out the proper way to deal with that, and I'm a teenager and I use drugs or I vape, right? An artificial amount of dopamine and serotonin is going to get released in my brain, an amount that I cannot naturally produce myself. And that my brain, without judgment, just remembers that felt good, and it makes a note of it and reminds me that I can repeat that if I want. And that's where we see that pattern. The brain is literally learning, and that's its job, especially when you're a young person. Your job is to learn, and your brain's taking a note of that and learning that this is something that increases my dopamine and serotonin. So all of that being said, it's really important to remember, I say all of that and I don't want to leave people feeling helpless, because it's a lot of information, and it can be a lot of kind of scary information, right? So what is really key is to remember that you are the number one influence, right? What you do, what you talk about, what you say, the messages you share, are really key, right? Uh, you're the protective factors in this, in your child's life. We know that there are a lot of protective factors. Delay use, like we talked about, or no use is a protective factor. But one of the key ones is known parental disapproval. If your child understands that you do not approve of these substances, that you do not approve of this, you're knowledgeable about them, and you know the effects, that can be really important a really important key protective factor for your child not using. If their friends don't use, it's a protective factor. If they have some level of trauma, getting them support is a protective factor. Healthy role models. You could be the healthy role model, and pointing out other people. That's a protective factor. Strong school connection is also a very important protective factor. If they feel like they have a voice, if they feel like they're part of something at school, a club, their day in and day out, whatever that may be, a sport, the stronger their school connection, the greater the protective factors, as well as understanding the harm of substances and little to no access to them. Obviously, the opposites are the risk factors. And again, you are the number one influence. When I'm working with students, when I'm in groups with them, I work with students who have already been caught vaping, right? If I'm coming into a group, I'm working with a student who is already vaping. And when we start to talk, one of the key disappointments they have is the fact that they've lost some trust with their parents. They've lost some trust with their guardians and the people that care about them. It's a loss. It's a very real loss, and they worry about what the impact is on that long term and how they can gain the trust back. And that shows me again and again that parents have influence. Parents have more influence than they even realize in a lot of cases. Because when I talk to parents, they think friends have the major influence. And of course, friends have a big influence. But parents are the ones that the students I work with continuously point to as the person that helps them make decisions ultimately, and the person that the people they don't want to disappoint. And, that's where it's important for us to continue to have conversations. And when we have those conversations, attempting to be relaxed and calm, be clear about your views, be clear about your thoughts. Try not to lecture, be positive, keeping an open mind, putting yourself again in your child's shoes. They're experiencing some very interesting and different experiences than we had, but there is a lot of different pressures that they're experiencing too. Know what you want to accomplish when you start a conversation, and use active listening, trying to really understand what they're experiencing. And again, your message being consistent is key. Making sure, when I ask kids, what do your parents think of substances? If they're unclear, they're like, I'm not really sure what my parents think of it, they're at a higher risk for using if they don't know that their parents definitively do not agree with use for them. So we can start in preschool. We can start having prevention conversations in preschool. We can talk about the joys of healthy living. We can celebrate their ability to make decisions and really help them take age-appropriate responsibility for some health choices and help them steer clear of dangerous substances at that age. Don't take the Advil, and really kind of important stuff around that. Help them understand the difference between real life and fantasy. So when they're watching cartoons and so forth, helping them work through frustrations in positive ways and praise them when they're being helpful, right? Helping them, with their own decision making. 5 through 8, ages 5 through 8, we can start prevention messaging there, presenting consequences around substance use, even at age appropriate levels, of course. Finding teachable moments, talking about the difference between, again, medication and substance use, what's safe. Don't ever take things that aren't given to you by your parents or prescribed by a doctor. Helping them express their feelings again. Thinking back to, this is kind of key throughout, giving people ways to healthy coping skills, healthy ways to express their feelings, problem solving, getting to know their friends and their friends' families, and encouraging them to participate in activities, starting that school connection. Ages 9 through 12, we want to establish consequences and expectations. Practicing refusal skills this is a great time to start. Again, I have 25-year-olds, and we used to practice refusal skills, and there were so many eye rolls, but it was really helpful. They told me later on they felt more confident when they were presented with vapes. They felt more confident and prepared on how to deal with that. A lot of times when I talk to students and I ask them, why did they use? Sometimes a lot of times actually, they say, I was presented with it and I didn't expect that I would say yes, but I didn't really know what to do in the situation. So I tried it. So really kind of making sure that our kids have that, they know they can advocate for themselves. They know they're comfortable, speaking up and refusing, and they don't have to justify it to other people, giving them that confidence to really empowering them to be able to say that and do that. Giving them facts about substance use and getting to know, again, parents, friends, family, and helping them still separate from reality and fantasy. What's going on in social media, what's going on TV, what's going on in video games. Ages 13 through 18, we want to look at those clear rules and consequences and making sure that, again, our messages are consistent. They understand that we disapprove, right? Opportunities to really talk about our feelings in a productive way and allowing them to do that. Listening rather than lecturing. Trying to use open-ended questions. We know this is really important because if you ask them how their day went, they're going to say fine. And that's about it, right? So, what was your favorite thing about today? Tell me something great that happened. Tell me something that happened that was hard. Open-ended questions. Make sure you're telling them all the wonderful things about them, right? And showing interest in their daily ups and downs. And, conversation starters, really kind of things like if there was drinking or cannabis at a party, what would you do? What do you think about cannabis and kids that use it? We didn't have social media when I was your age. How does that factor into your social life and views on vaping and other drugs? Just trying to look at like really kind of in-depth ways to start to talk about getting their ideas about other people's behavior, about their own behavior, their perspective. It can be really interesting. Using opportunities like what you're watching on TV, if you're driving around, if they're trapped in your car and you want to have conversations, these are great times to do it, right? We know that if you eat together as much as possible, eat dinner together, that's a great protective factor, right? It's a great opportunity for those open-ended questions and conversations. And we don't need to buy into teen stereotypes. We don't need to think that their friends are the ones that affect them the most. We don't need to think that they're going to drink anyway. We don't need to buy into those stereotypes. We can hold them accountable and we can hold them into high expectations, and they will live up to them. They don't want to disappoint their parents. They don't want to disappoint their guardians. They want to have our approval. They want us to be proud. And that's, if we give them clear expectations and understanding, they can live up to that. They can achieve that. And they want that, right? Also looking for positive childhood experiences, including feeling connections, supported, trying to find ways for them to do that in school, trying to find ways for them to do that in the community. This is a feeling of safety, has a lot around routines too. Offering, trying to find ways for them to participate in leadership roles, even when they're young, right? Consistent like morning greetings, dinner routines, that kind of, consistent behavior, consistent routines really, creates safety, right? Always trying to remember that we point out, and I think we all do a good job of this, but it's a great reminder, like let's point out when they're doing great and let's remember that, right? Even if it's something small. Helping them make choices, looking for ways to encourage them and encourage a sense of belonging, looking for those opportunities. That's a great protective factor. And we know that when they participate in healthy activities, when they get to contribute to family, when they get to contribute at school, when they feel like they have a voice, that's huge. It helps establish self-worth. It helps to empower when they feel like they're a part of something. And help them identify opportunities to do that, help them seek out opportunities, stay connected with the school yourself so that you can really look for those opportunities as well. And you are the expert on your child. Absolutely. So if you see changes in behavior, if you see mood swings, if you see conduct concerns, if you see change in who they're hanging out with, in their school performance, if you see evidence of smells and poor hygiene even, or neglecting responsibilities, changes in their behavior, you're the expert. So trust your gut. If you see these concerns, it's important to act. Changes in sleep and appetite, right? And that's where, you have school counselors, you have SAP team, you have pediatricians, you have a lot of community resources. There are a lot of people out there to help support concerns, to help support your students, your children, and you, and really kind of guide you to the resources that you do need. We have, and I'll make sure again that you have this. We have a lot of really great self-guided prevention resources. It's all grant funded, no cost, and also more education. If you wanted to dive further into understanding nicotine or cannabis, more resources on how to talk to your child, conversation starters, support for family, and so forth. We have tons and tons of resources at our website, and I'll make sure that you have those copies or that availability. We also have a youth screening tool. This can be done by your child. You can do this together if you have concerns or you're curious. But this is a way that again, if you're seeing those behavior changes, if you're seeing those red flags, this is a tool that can actually help assess whether or not more support is needed. But again, you're the expert, so you don't even necessarily need this tool to seek out help, to ask for it. Don't ever hesitate to do that, right? We have tons of videos, podcasts. If you want to learn more, we have tons of topics on substance use, grief, stress, all sorts of really interesting, great conversations around from experts around a lot of things that impact our young people. And I'm supposed to say, follow us on social media if you'd like, but no pressure. So I'm going to stop sharing, but I would love to leave some time for questions because that was a lot of information. So if anyone has any questions about substance use, prevention, conversation starters, anything like that, I would love to take the opportunity now to answer any questions. Should also mention, I'm going to have my email in this PowerPoint because sometimes people don't want to ask in front of others. So I'll make sure that you can feel free to reach out too if you have any questions for me.
Hi, my name is Julie.
Hi.
Oh, I'm sorry, another gal was going to jump on.
Go ahead.
I just have, I guess, a question about kind of what I'm condoning. I've gotten to the point where initially nicotine was, oh my goodness, they're doing this. I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
And now they've gone to THC and nicotine. And now I'm like, the older one seems to be going away with the THC, but that it's almost like I'm feeling like I'm starting to condone the nicotine, and I don't want to because I'll agree with everything that you have said. And in my research and everything, and thousands of chemicals in these vapes, and I just don't know. I feel like I'm just feeling stuck. Like I don't want to condone it, but I don't. Do I choose my battles? Like I think he's trying to. I think he's using the pouches.
Mm-hmm.
He has also used both. He might be even doing both. We're drug testing weekly. I just feel stuck.
Yeah. And it is like so these are really addictive products. They have a ton of nicotine. And so we're seeing addiction happen really quick. So he's more than likely dealing with nicotine addiction. So there's resources. I mean, you could even take him to like the hospital actually has cessation groups, but that a lot of students aren't interested in that. Um,
Well,
I would explore cessation
we are
groups.
seeing a drug and alcohol therapist
Okay,
that is a
good.
pretty new start.
Okay,
We haven't gotten into probably nitty gritty. They've only been a couple times.
sure.
I have 3 boys, but my 15-year-old and 17-year-old are the ones that are getting in trouble.
So the other thing too is if you're looking to change a behavior somebody who's dealing with a substance use disorder, even with nicotine, from a treatment perspective, we really do push no substances. Because if you're going to change
Yeah,
THC behavior,
you're just going to
nicotine,
add something else.
yeah.
Because I
So
know he's used alcohol too, and I feel like the alcohol, I don't know how long it's been going on, but I feel like I found evidence after he told us he was done with the THC.
yeah.
So now you're doing the alcohol, so it's yeah, I agree with you. And
So
I
the
feel like it's just so much in his face at school, and he's peer pressured or whatever it is. And I also have a quick question about, you mentioned the pediatrician as kind of like a resource, and I had made an appointment recently for my 15-year-old to see the pediatrician. I think we were just having a conversation or having like the feeling that we needed help besides the therapy, like,
yeah.
and is there something he could he take, like, I guess the pediatrician, I'm sorry, I'm summing up from my thoughts,
Okay.
but could the pediatrician maybe prescribe like a Wellbutrin or something if there is an anxiety or a depression that's going on? Like, I think I could possibly see her and she could help him navigate his feelings instead of going towards the illegal drugs,
Yeah.
find something that's allowed.
So what I was going to say, as far as in general, I mean, the core of a lot of behavior, a lot of the substance use is looking for skills, looking for stress reduction skills. So working with a counselor on that end for the older students would be great, because you're going to look at behavior change on how to deal with stress without substances, how to deal with uncomfortable feelings without substances. The pediatrician could look towards other resources for your youngest as a prevention method, how to deal with stress in a healthy way. So, I mean, that's kind of the core. So it sounds like you're working with professionals, and it sounds like you're thinking in terms of prevention with the youngest one, and that is the direction that we normally advise.
Right. Yeah. And what other quick um, tips do you have? I guess all of this really that I went over tonight, I'm going to probably try and share with my 13-year-old, because the one therapist had a kind of discussion with us at our first meeting where he had my husband pretend he was the little brother. And he pretended and looked up, oh, this is my name is Jason, and I have a little brother. I have 2 older brothers, and I look up to them, but they're doing stuff I'm not sure if it's okay. So, like, hearing that perspective, I think, was interesting for the older 2 to kind of be a little bit like afraid. Like, I wouldn't want my brother to use that.
Yeah, that being a positive role model.
But,
Yeah, I would also, school has great resources. The SAT program at school has some great resources. So looking to connect, especially your youngest, with some prevention resources is a good place to start too.
At the middle school?
Yeah, yeah. There more than likely is going to be some great options there in their SAP department.
Can you speak at our high school?
I have actually, have I? I have spoken at a lot of high schools, but I do a lot of prevention presentations. But I know that the district does a really great job with prevention messaging. And again, just connecting with the SAP program, connecting with the guidance counselors there is a great opportunity to look for some good prevention.
We have definitely tried that. Thank you so much for your help.
Thank you.
And your answer to the question.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
That segues really nicely into my questions.
Sure.
So so my kids are 8 and 11, so they're still pretty young.
Yeah.
I'm trying to always get ahead of everything. Fortunately, I feel like I'm actually ahead of this one. A lot of other things, it's more like, catching up. But
Sure.
I was wondering, and maybe this is more, I see that Kate Coulter and Laura Cohen on, maybe they can comment, or others that are within the district. about sort of the prevention resources and strategies that are used in Westchester Area School District. I'm not, this is the first time I'd heard of SAP, so that's like Substance Abuse Prevention
A student, yeah,
Team,
it's
or
student assistance
oh,
program.
Student Assistance Program.
Yeah,
Okay.
but they tend to have a strong relationship with the prevention department, or the prevention individuals at the school, whoever they may be, and they also are really good about like making sure that they can recommend resources and so forth. Yeah.
Okay.
As far as yeah, you're right. I don't know if I can necessarily speak in depth about what's going on at the district, but I can leave that to Loretta or Kate.
Yeah, Loretta or Kate.
I really cannot either, so I'm going to let Kate do that. She might be away from her desk at the moment or something. I'm not sure, but I'll talk for a little bit, and then hopefully if Kate comes back at the end, she can, or I can connect you with her, Katie.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly,
Sounds
right?
good. Yeah.
This is, that is sort of the bread and butter of what she does.
Yeah.
I love to, real quick, if people don't mind, I have two things. Julie, I was listening to you talk, and I honestly, with my kids, I also have 25 and a couple years older than that, but I tend to focus on those brain pathways because it is universal across every kid. It is never like my kid has this issue, right? It's all human brains function the same exact way. And it sort of is just like, then you're not accusing them of anything. You're saying this is why it's important. And I really lean on the brain science as hard as I can when I'm having conversations. And I think the other thing that Selena mentioned too is these alternatives. Like you have to replace it. I think a lot of it is that risk seeking, where kids start as risk seeking. So what are some healthy, I often will say, go climb a tree, please. It's exhilarating, right? And it's risky. It's genuinely a little risky, but we need to allow our kids to find exhilaration in places. So yeah,
I love that.
Those are sort of two of my big takeaways all the time from these kind of talks. I do want to share my screen. For some reason, I still cannot share my camera, so I'm so sorry about that. And let's hope that can you see my screen?
Oh, here, let me stop sharing. Oh, did I?
Cannot.
Oh, I did. I can't either.
You can't stop sharing?
No, I did stop sharing. I can't see your screen.
Okay. Select a tab to share.
Has there been any, I don't know how to ask this, I guess, just in relation to the accessibility of the products? Has there been a way of, I mean, I guess there's been products in high schools for years, like there was cigarettes in the 70s or whatever, and now it's just a new way of delivery.
Yeah.
And I know also, I guess, that if the child, or basically, a child can't access the drug at the high school, then he's going to get it somewhere else, I guess. But I feel like there's an epidemic across the country and probably the world that it's accessible in the schools. And I just don't know how, I feel like if there's a way of that helping, I don't know, that this is not necessarily through you, but I mean, just find ways where there's less ways of accessing it. It just boggles my mind that they're under 21 and can get this access. I get carded at Wegmans to buy non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah.
And they're accessing this as young teenagers.
Yeah.
It's online, from what I heard, right, Selena?
Oh, really?
And they're getting it online. There's a lot of different ways that you can purchase. If you go onto some of these websites, you can just say, like it says, are you over 21? And you can just click yes. And, so we do a lot of, making sure that they don't have access to credit cards, or, if they do, making sure to see, what's coming in the mail. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, online, there's certainly still stores.
One of my son's friends, I think that he said something about medical marijuana. So that's highly addictive too. It's like the same.
It's the same. It's the
Yeah.
same. Medical marijuana is marijuana.
He's trying to say, oh, it's safer or it's, healthy, whatever,
It's the same. I mean, it's a little, people are ideally kind of understand what strain they're getting, but it's the same. It's marijuana and it's high THC. There's
Highly
high
addictive.
levels. Yeah, in medical marijuana as well. Yeah. We could see your screen, Loretta. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I definitely don't want to cut off questions. I wrote down accessibility in the schools, Julie, so I'll ask Kate about that too, as well as Katie was just sort of general, like what are the resources available in school, right? Is that what you were asking, Katie?
What is like the prevention kind of strategy of the school district?
Yeah. I mean,
How often are the kids learning about drugs and alcohol in school, and how often are they hearing sort of about
they
the
do get
risks?
it in their health classes, and I will tell you, whenever I'm dealing with teens, I always will ask, at what age does the human brain stop developing? And they'll be like 25.
Oh,
And
nice.
I'm like, they know that, they know.
Yeah.
So the schools are definitely talking about brain development and healthy brain development with them. So it's in there. But again, Kate, I will put both those questions to her and have her reach out.
I can give you Loretta, you're
here?
absolutely you're correct, Loretta, that is true, that they do learn about it in health class. I think I missed the first question, but your answer to the second question was correct. But what was the first question?
The other one was accessibility, I think, from Julie, like how kids are getting it at school and what steps are being taken to prevent it from being accessible at school.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think at school, if they're getting it from friends, and it's really, really difficult to police that. Like if we have Safe to Say, that, a lot of times kids use that to report because it's anonymous and they don't, if it's a friend and they don't want the friend to be angry at them, they can anonymously report that. So we get a lot of information from that, and we follow up on every single tip. The other thing that we get a lot of information from is Gaggle, which is the platform that we use that it constantly searches the students' Google accounts, their Google Drive, their Gmail, their Microsoft 360. And I'm the person who's in charge of that. So same with Safe to Say some things, but so with Gaggle, if a student types in anything about any concerning word, anything from suicide to weed to marijuana, there's live people looking at it all the time. And so then they send me, depending on the severity of it, I either get an email, and I get many emails all day long, or I get a call or a text if it's something pretty concerning that needs to be dealt with right away. And then I get it, I reach out to the school, either the admin or the counselor or both, and it's handled that way. So that is where we get a lot more information too, because kids don't realize that we're able to see when they're, because, a lot of kids use their Google Drive as a messaging board, to each other all day long. And so if anybody's messaging each other on there, we see it, and the kids are made aware of it. It's not a secret. I mean, it's so funny because sometimes within their Google Drive, like on this little message board, someone will say, I know someone from the school's probably watching this. I want to be like typing, like, yes, I am. So, we do everything we can if there's any concerning anything, and we, an admin follows up on it immediately. So.
Just going back to the drug education, essentially, when in health class does that start? So I have a third grader and a fifth grader. Are they already hearing about this? I feel like it's never too early, but I don't know what the district does.
I don't believe in elementary school because in most elementary,
they have health as they learn health concepts sort of in gym. Right.
In fifth grade, the end of fifth grade, they have the whole puberty thing where they
the maturation talk.
Yeah,
yes,
mm-hmm.
that has
happened.
happened.
That's really when the vaping thing and drugs needs to
So
be
the needs to
distributed.
be, but it's not actually mentioned then.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
have to check into exactly when it comes into the curriculum, but I'm assuming it's in middle school. I don't
Middle
believe it's in
school.
5th grade.
Yeah.
It needs to be in 5th grade.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to chime in. Sorry, Kate. I hope I'm not talking
No,
over
go
you.
ahead, Loretta.
But a couple things to be aware of. It is, I always say it's never too early or too late to start having these conversations. On the early end, you're having conversations like Selena was talking about what you value in your household.
Yeah.
If you're drinking with a holiday meal, what you say, I'm only going to have one because more than one wouldn't be good for me, or whatever. You make these offhanded, casual comments without, you don't have to lecture or that's prevention messaging. You're talking with your kids. The language we choose, whether if we have a really bad day at work, do we come home and say, oh, I need a drink? That sends a message to our kids. I'm not saying if anybody has done that, you're like the worst parent. We all have good days and bad days. These are just strategies, right? Making sure our language around alcohol, around substances is clear. That was one of Selena's points. The other thing is that PAYS data, that Pennsylvania Youth Survey data, comes directly from Westchester School District kids. And if you're a data junkie and you want to look at it, you can find it on our website. I'm sure it's on the district website too, but at wcctc.org/data, you can find a summary of it. And you can also find the full 115-page document. You'll see that numbers in 6th grade are very, very low for all substance use. So I might argue that for education, 6th grade is a good place to start because we don't really see a rise in it. A little rise in 8th grade, bigger rise in 10th, bigger rise in 12th grades. Again, that can always be debated. Kate can take this conversation back to her peers and colleagues that she works with.
The other piece of it is that there's a number of parents who object to it being brought up to their elementary school kids, because some of them feel like that's introducing them to an idea that they've been sheltered from. So
if they're getting phones at that age, they should be.
I hear you. But I'm giving you both sides of what we hear,
I agree.
that it's,
I do understand.
yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, but there's lots of stuff we can do in our homes at that age for sure. And it's interesting because it's very hard to have these conversations until our kids are older, right? But a lot of the conversations we could be having in our homes, I didn't do it either. I didn't start talking about it until I started smelling alcohol on one of my kids' breaths, right? In high school. And I was like, whoa, same thing as you guys were describing. You're like, oh, I need to address this now. And I didn't work in this field then, right? I haven't worked in this field as long as Selena has, but so we really, I think
I struggle with.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think I struggle with how much to lock down. I clamp down. Like the more we clamp down, the more they're going to pull away. And I want to save the relationship and the connection. So it can ebb and flow. We're not going to condone either one. And I feel like it's really a challenge to like allow so much freedom, but then not allow freedom or allow bits and then say like a big day of freedom. That's what it could look like all the time if we can trust you and you can keep our values, in your heart. And I just think like I said, I just don't, I think it's just a work in progress and constant communication, not just saying, oh, well, this is what it is. I can't stop them. They're going to take this path, but I need to, we're trying to stay on them, but.
I love Loretta's point about brain development too, because I think that entirely removes judgment. Yeah. And I think that's a really valuable thing, because you're right, Loretta. It's not pointing at it and saying this is a you problem. It's pointing at it and saying this is a person who has a brain that's under the age of 25. This is why we protect it. So it's something that you can lean on like kind of definitively.
It's like
And
you're blaming age 25 and you're blaming the brain. You're not blaming you.
yeah,
Right.
you
I mean,
know,
it's the same conversation we have around video games with like
yeah,
my kids that are younger now. It's like your brains are really vulnerable, and this is why we have to have rules. And there are other entities, video game manufacturers, nicotine manufacturers that, they just want to make money off of you.
they want to
And
profit off of you. Yeah.
right, exactly. So yeah, you
And it's
can.
your role as the parent to protect them from these outside
Right,
things, you know?
right.
And
And
yeah,
sometimes
I
that
love
can
that.
empower the kid too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you know,
Yeah. You know,
Um,
you're right. When they realize that, like, hey, someone else is making a choice for you, it makes them
right.
angry. When
Yeah,
I'm in groups and I'm like, guys, like this is literally the marketing. This is their intention. This is what they're, and it makes them angry because they're like, I don't want to be that. Like, I don't want to fall prey to that.
right.
And you're right. It becomes empowering. It's interesting.
The other thing that many families have found helpful is, and I say this for technology, I say it for substances, it can be used for anything, but is an agreement, a family agreement that you all come to an agreement on. And Julia, I don't know anything about, I don't know anything about your own personal substance use or whatever, but when you can say, I promise, we have a family value that says we will never drink and drive.
Yeah.
Everybody is signing off on that.
Right.
I have a value for myself because I'm over 25, but I still care about my health, that I will what, right? Like that you make rules for yourself around substances, I bet. I don't know what your rules are. It doesn't really matter, but your kids knowing that you have rules for yourself and you follow them
Mm-hmm.
helps them. And then, but as a family, you also come up, what are our family rules for people who are under 25? And why is that? And talk together with them about it. What should the rules be and
And
why are
agreements,
they?
rules can be for not necessarily specifically for outside of the home, but even just like we're not going to allow someone to come into our home and use these substances either.
Right.
So
Right.
that in addition,
And
that's a good point.
it's really hard while it's happening. I can't say. I remember my poor friends. And my daughter is still friends with this girl to this day. And I always say, if I hear the name Megan one more time, because it was Megan this and Megan that, and years later, come to find out they were drinking in her basement, and I didn't know that at the time, but there was some little seed there, right? So I was like, okay, still great kid. I love this girl. These are not, there's no like judgment on the kids themselves, but part of what prevention is, part of what you guys are doing right now with your kids, making sure you're very clear about your values, is what your kids will come back to after they're done breaking your rules. We can never promise that they're not never going to break your rules. You sit down, you make an agreement, and your kids will never break it. I can't say that. But the studies show that kids come back to relying on and finding their way back to what their parents value versus what
They actually need those boundaries,
yeah.
not realizing
Absolutely.
it, not like raising their hand, say, me, give me those boundaries, but they actually do deep down, I think, want them.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. I know we're way past. I love the conversation like this. I have to be honest, that really rarely happens when we do webinars. So I'm so glad that you guys were talkative. I'm so glad. Selena, thank you
Thank
that you were
you.
here to do all this. I'm going to flip through these, but I did want to real quick, a little thing about our PAYS data that we talked about already. Another piece of things that we do with this past fall was the first time they added screen questions to that Pennsylvania Youth Survey. So now, in addition to looking at substances, we're also looking at screen addiction, at technology use, and all the various forms of that and how that's impacting our kids. So we have a new parent group called Westchester Unplugged that just launched this year. If you would like to be a part of that, you can find it on our website, or scan this. There's a little survey just to kind of for us to touch base with what's going on in your world around technology, what kind of things you would like to see, maybe a presentation on like this, but around technology. And then there's a way for you to sign up for that mailing list. And so you can get onto our email list where we're really just talking about the technology piece and those emails that you'll get from that. So if that's something that is of interest to you, feel free. I know Katie is already on that list. So, but yeah, I want to thank everybody. I had like a million other things. I think this is our Thrive projects we do with kids. We take the messaging from that PACE data and we turn them into public health campaigns that the kids made and the kids can see. This is on the right is at the Wawa on Westchester Pike. And there was a group of kids that put this together. This girl, it was mainly her idea, so we got her picture with it.
That's awesome.
There's been a number of them over the years. This is the one we're doing this year that I said
Love
you might
that.
find. You might
Great.
find you might see on social media, you might see it out in the community. Please, like if you see it on social media, share it with a friend. It's all information this links back to about why their connection to school is so important. And like I said at the top of this, it's been their connection to school has been declining. And so we want more people to understand why that connection is so important and to feel confident in your role of helping them see the value in school and all it has to offer. That's it for me.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Loretta. Thanks, Selena.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Guys,
Bye.
have a good night.
Bye.
Thank you.